that she had, that she contributed besides the house, which was
Spaghetti cheese sandwiches.
cheese sandwiches on toasted raisin bread.
bread.
It was just elegant.
That was such a hit.
Yeah, and then she had like fruit on a stick and everything. So that was the best crew food we ever had, with the greatest service
And
and
such
just
a beautiful home.
in a beautiful
goodness.
home. And then she, her granddaughter came and played the most adorable little Dushka coming back from Russia. So the child is wearing a christening gown that's old. I think you had gotten that, like a historic christening gown. Has a fur wrapped around her. It is June and it is 100 degrees outside. And there wasn't a peep from that child. She was just absolutely wonderful.
She actually went to sleep on
Yeah,
I
she
thought
went
so
to
too.
sleep.
Yeah.
I was
It was a
getting
shock.
nervous because I was afraid she was too hot in the
Passed
first.
out.
Somebody bitched maybe.
Well, and then
I think the stroke of genius in the making of this was deciding who would narrate it. And tell us how you came to that, and then Judith, what it felt like.
Oh, you mean for the
house.
perspective to be?
the omniscient narrator
Yes.
as the house.
You know, I'm not quite sure where that came from, except that I can feel that in this house. I can feel that it has a presence. There is a presence here, and one of the things that was so compelling about the story is that those people, all of those people have been in here, and how would we tell all that story except from the perspective of the house itself? And then at some point it just seemed that it was a woman, and you'll hear Judith, as the voice of Edgewood, talk about her beautiful woodwork, and I thought it was like she wore the house, kind of
Like jewelry.
like
Molding.
jewelry. Yeah.
Yeah.
She inhabits the house. She is the house. But it was also turned out to be a really great way to tell a story from a perspective that she has some opinions. It's not a straight documentary. It's a docudrama, and it's from the perspective of the house, and so we can only project what the house might, or infer what, if someone could watch it from beginning to now, you know, what some of your conclusions might be.
Well, she questioned slavery and property ownership, and said, in case of like a property, like the home, yes, I'm property, but then how could human beings be that? And tell us, Judith, you had points where you were reading, and then you had points where you were Edgewood.
Yeah. When we recorded the final version of the narration, I was determined, and Christy and Jamie both thought this was a good idea, to do it straight all the way through. It took us about 5 hours, I think, to come up with approximately 1 hour of good narration, backing up and going forward. And it did evolve sort of as we did this. We would change things as they struck us. When I would read it, it would come across one way, or we'd think of new ideas. So there was that element. But I think from the house's perspective, the house, yes, was a witness to all the scenes that you see in the documentary, but the house also heard the secret longings and what went on in the rooms when the door closed, and knew these people in the heart of the house, and grew very fond of especially the women, because the women were here. The women were the heart of the home, and they tended to the children, tended to the home. Mm-hmm. And I think there was a special bond there as well. Mm-hmm. So as these stories are told, it's almost a motherly kind of tale that is told by watching these children grow up, by watching Francis and the wives that he had, and the tragedies that were encountered along the way, and Lucinda and Tom and all the work that went on here, and the heartaches and the triumphs and the history. It's just
Yes.
astounding.
That's-
It's astounding.
To pass in one geographical location. We also, the house, unlike any of us who would have been in this room, was privy to the antebellum man cave discussion. So not a one of us would have been allowed in there. Of course, Jamie was the man filming it, but it's fantastic because then we can narrate over it. But even as, part of the crew, I wanted to know what they were saying.
I'll never tell.
They had their cigars, they had their, my Hennessy, I might add, to be realistic. And had discussions, and you can imagine that a home who could be personified like this would have heard all of these things and would have questioned or seen the longer picture, or was going to live longer, if you will, than any of the people that were there and be a part of history. So it's a magnificent narration tool, Christy, that we've all just felt chills knowing that the house can tell the story, because she, and it's fantastic that it's a she would have been around for all of these generations.
That brings me to, what about this house has made so many people love it so much? Because, I mean, the women's, we've talked about that. I mean, they say Lucy's ghost is still here because she couldn't leave,
Yeah.
that she loved it. And then Miss Eulalie loved it so much to move it,
Right.
to Aiken and live in it. And then I came to love it, and all of you now, I think,
Yeah.
love it
Yes.
in a way. It's just something that embraces you.
Yes, it
Well,
sure is.
On the campus, it is different from every other building. So right away, it's a little jewel here that and how fortunate, how many campuses have something with this kind of history.
Well, the history is quite incredible. I mean, when we first started, we were looking at Lucy Pickens and Eulalie and present day. And then, yes, oh, by the way, Francis Pickens is the secessionist governor and is the one that, says okay to the Civil War. Well, that built the house. And then, so we've got that. She was called the Belle of the South, the only woman that was ever on Confederate money. Fast forward to her daughter, who rode in Reconstruction, and Oakley Park has all of her information there. And then, oh, by the way, Lucy's granddaughter, Lucy and Francis's granddaughter, marries B.R. Tillman, and he takes the children away, deeds the children away, which is a huge national news piece in 1910.
And I'll interrupt us for a second, because for me as a woman, that was one of the most powerful scenes, filming the Tillman case in the courthouse where it happened, with the deed,
Yeah.
the actual deed
And
of the
it wasn't
children.
almost like 100 years to the
Yeah.
day.
Yes,
It
it
was
is.
almost
Yes.
to the day.
It was
There were
just
different-
incredibly, when I describe, and of course I love this house, but when
Yeah.
I described this, one of the scenes that moved me the most personally, that one really did.
As it did Eulalie,
And
obviously.
and to circle back around, that it was Eulalie that knew the history of that, because she lived personally
It
through
changed-
that event. where
Changed
someone-
her life
Yeah.
from who she had been to who she
To this
became.
activist
And-
person. That's a part of the story that we really worked hard on, and also had other people come in, from Douglas Culbreath, who was a relative of the Tom Lee character and told some stories. He's in Philadelphia now, to trying to understand Lucinda even after she is no longer enslaved. How does a person stay in the same location? And we always looked with these kind of characters, sometimes we'd make them composite characters.